Hello, it's Misha Aodán Mac Séafraidh, no Jaff Mars Farai Nyaram. My name's Aodán Mac Séafraidh, or Jaff as some people call me, a bit of a nickname from school days. And I'm going to talk a bit about Gaeilge, or the Irish language. Now, first thing is, why would I be talking about Gaelic? Well, we live in a country, and in a part of the country where we're surrounded by Irish place names or Gaelic place names, loads of Gaelic surnames, and even some of the slang that we use and some of the words that we use in English have come from Gaelic. So it's a big part of our background. And South Antrim, in fact, is very rich with Irish place names in particular. So we'll talk a bit about that. We'll talk a bit about surnames, and we'll talk a bit about some of the slang words that we use in English. And funny enough, a lot of these slang words are shared in English and Scots, which is another language that has influenced us here in this part of the world. So we'll talk a bit about that. But first of all, where does the Irish language or Gaelic come from? Well, that's a very hard question to answer, and lots of scholars and academics have been kind of arguing over it and wrestling over it for a long time. Some people say that the Gaelic language came from Central Europe and came across, and people came to, first of all, Britain, and then to Ireland at the end of the Ice Age. And there's no doubt that there was people in Ireland here 6 or 7 or more, maybe 8,000 years ago, but we don't know what language they spoke. So most people are agreed that the Gaelic language that was spoken in Ireland for about 1500 years at least came to Ireland about 500, between 500 and 300 BC. So it's been here for a very long time. So basically, we don't have written records of that early period, so there was nothing written down. There was a form of Irish writing called ogham, which consisted of etchings or lines on the corner of stones and on pieces of wood, and that was the early form of writing. After that, they adopted and adapted Roman letters and the alphabet that most languages use in Europe today. So, how does Irish work? Well, it's a language that is very, very different from English. It belongs to the same group of languages as English, the Indo-European languages and kind of Proto-European languages going back thousands of years, but it is very, very different, and it's actually more akin to Welsh and Cornish and Breton. And in fact, the Gaelic language, when it was spoken all over Ireland, it was also spoken all over Scotland, virtually all of Scotland at one period, and also on the Isle of Man, and possibly parts of the north of England as well. So it was a substantial language in terms of area at one stage. So Irish language is a language that has kind of diminished greatly, especially in the last 170, 180 years. Most of the people who died during the famine times and the people who emigrated to North America or went to England or went to Australia and New Zealand and places like that were Irish speakers in the 19th century. And in fact, many of them landed in places like North America and Australia, and they didn't speak English, they spoke only Irish, but they learned English very quickly. And so the language died out as a community language for the people who emigrated. But I suppose the most interesting thing about it is the order of the words, and linguists call this syntax. So when you get word order in a particular language, it's different. For example, most people will know in French that you put the adjective after the noun and stuff like that. And likewise in Irish, that's what you normally do. So for example, The word for castle is Cashlan, and if you wanted to say the Black Castle, for example, you'd say An Cashlan Du, An Cashlan Du, An Cashlan Du. Okay, and other things, for example, if you wanted to say the red car, in English you say the, so you have the article, then red, the colour, and car. But in Gaelic you say an car jarag, an car jarag, the car red. Okay, so and when it comes to sentences saying the car is red, in English you're going to say the car is red. In Gaelic you're going to say ta and car jarag, ta and car jarag, and you put the verb first. So you have ta is the verb, ta, and car, the car, jarag, the car is red. So immediately you can see a big difference from English in that the word order is different. The verb comes first in the simple sentence. So just thinking of some of the, I'm aware that this is a talk for people around the Lisburn area in particular, and I'm just thinking of some of the place names that are around Lisburn. And Lisburn itself is a name that goes back a couple of hundred years, of course, maybe 300 years. And up until about 1700, the town of what's now called Lisburn was called Lisnagarrowach, Lisnagarrowach. And Lis is a small enclosure, or sometimes called a fort. And Lisnagarrowach actually means the fort of the gamblers or the gamesters. So not a lot of people know that. But what happened was there was a big fire in Lisburn in, I think it's 1700 or 1701 or something like that. There must have been a big fire there anyway, and a lot of houses were destroyed and stuff. And from that time on, it was called Lisburn, which is it's a bit unfortunate that that's the way it's remembered. A catastrophe like a big fire. But Lisnagarrowach is still used in Lisburn. It's, I believe there's sports teams and stuff called Lisnagarvey, etc. So Lisnagarvey is an anglicised form of Lisnagarrowach. But there's lots of other names around the area as well. Another place in the greater Lisburn area is a place called Aodán. And Achu is a word meaning field, and it's a word found all over Ireland, all over Scotland, and it means a kind of enclosed field. And Galan, in this instance, means of the standing stones. So Aodán means the field of the standing stones. And then we have Glenavy, which is actually misspelt. It's not actually a glen, it's not a valley, glan as such. It's lan, which means church. It's an old Irish word for church, Lan Abbey. And there was a man of very short stature, should we say, who was a follower of St. Patrick apparently, and who founded a church there, and it was called Lan Abbey, the Church of the Dwarf. Another place name that has come up in Lisburn is Blaris, and that Blaris actually means battlefield. So, and at one stage there was a small townland called Balachampel Blarish, or the townland of the Church of Blaris. Another one is Balanderi. Balanderi, of course, Derry is from the word Dara, which is an oak wood, and Balanderi then is the townland of the oak wood. Dundrod, it was originally known as Dún Killatrodine or Ballakillatrodine, and it meant the townland of the Church of St. Trodden. So there's a funny one for you. Another one that I found quite funny was Mahara Raha Meshka, or Mahara Meshk. Mahara Mesh means the plain of the ringfort of the drunkenness. So, and another one that I came across is Muckamore or Moy Hummer, which basically means the plain of the confluence of the rivers. So there's quite a lot in one short name there, Moy Hummer or Muckamore, as it's been anglicised, and it means the plain of the confluence of the rivers. So Another one in the Lisburn area that's well known is Lambeg. And Lambeg, the M sound in Lambeg, I'm not sure how that came about, but again, it's a bit like Lanavi. Lan means church and Lambeg means the little church or a little church. And apparently that area was previously known as Tully na Sagart, or the Hillock of the Priests, prior to 1600. And there's a few other place names occurred to me around Castlereagh area as well. And Castlereagh itself being Caisleanriach, meaning the Grey Castle. And this was the castle that is associated with the Clandyboy O'Neills, or Clandaboy Eniel and Shin in that area. And there was a castle there apparently at one stage, and I think it's now, well, there's no trace of it now apparently, or whatever trace there is has been built on, and it's there now stands an Orange Hall and Presbyterian Church on the site where the castle once stood. So that's the origin of that name, Caisleanriach. There's also other areas, I suppose, or other place names around there. There's a couple of others with Riach at the end, like Castlereagh. There's Moneyreagh, and there's also Carrareagh. So Riach again. Carrareagh, however, has a slightly different name in that it means fallow quarterland. So Carew is a quarterland, Carew, and then we have Moneyreagh is the grey bog or the featureless bog. So Moneyreagh is another one with Reach at the end. And speaking of Carrow, or as you say in Gaelic, Carew is also the first element in the place name Carryduff. It's actually Cara Igiv, and it means black hues quarter or dark hues quarter. And when you say black or dark, it's a reference to whoever Hugh was, to his hair colour. He was very dark haired, so he was called Dark Hugh or Edu. And then when you want to say black hues quarters, Cara Igiv. Okay, so another one, of course, is the Lagan. Now, Lagan is a very, very, very old place name. It possibly goes back millennia. It could kind of predate Gaelic speaking people even, but Lagan, as it's understood in Irish, is it's Owen and Lagan, or the river of the low-lying district. So Owen meaning river, and Lagan of the low-lying district. A couple of other ones that came to light. Lis na Shara, I suppose, is sort of in the outskirts of the Belfast area. Lis na Shara actually means the fort of the foals, the young horses, fort of the foals. And another area that's beside that is Slacht Addy, which means Addy's memorial stone. And another Lis would be Lis na Brini, the fort of the faring dwelling. And the only other one that's occurred to me is, I suppose, Maze. Maze is from the Old Irish word anwai meaning the plain. And I'm not sure where the z bit at the end came from. Maybe there was another suffix or an additional word on the end of that at one stage, but it's the research gives it as anwai, meaning the plain. Okay, so I've done enough talking about place names and things. I hope it's been interesting for you. We're going to have a wee song now. My wife's going to join us, and we're going to sing a song about Lisburn, an old folk song.
boys, wherever you be, come and pay attention unto me. It being of these few lines I have penned down, and all in praise of Lisburn town. Well, it happened to be on the harvest year, when I roamed out, the day being clear, and on coming home these words I said, I am deep in love with the Lisburn maid. Oh, she's tall and handsome, quite complete. She's like a Wexford girl from head to feet, and my heart it doth rend as I see her pass. I am deep in love with the Lisburn lass. And everything that was going around, until her parents on me did frown. And when her parents on me they did frown, I was forced to list in Lisburn town. Oh, well, dear, this young maid did say, what has tempted you for to go away? I have left my parents a fiery man, for to go with you from Lisburn town. But it was off to India I had to go, for to fight and to face the foe, not knowing when a ball it would cut me down, and leave my love in Lisburn town. So it's farewell, father and mother too, likewise my darling I bid adieu, for these cruel foes they have cut me down. So it's farewell, love and Lisburn town.
Jacqueline is learning some Irish at the moment, so it's very interesting, the sounds and the accents and stuff. I mean, you have a good accent to go with Irish. You've got some of those sounds already. So you were talking about the sort of slang words and stuff, but there's you've got a few slang words in Scotland too, and you've place names as well that are kind of very obviously Gaelic place names. Like, there's a place called Aodán Mac Séafraidh.
You say that so well. Aodán Mac Séafraidh. Yes, don't make such a dinner out of it. Okay. But I'm aware that sounds amusing.
Yeah. Well, Uachtar, anywhere called Uachtar, and in fact there's a couple of places in South Antrim. I mean, there's Masarina, Uachtar, Upper Masarina and stuff like that. But I mean, which is the name of the barony. But there's also there's a place near Lagan in County Antrim, Kilwater, and that's actually Kiluachtar, or the Upper Church, Kiluachtar. So Uachtar Mac Séafraidh would be the upper lands of the pigs or the boars. So that's what that means. It must have been a place for either keeping pigs or for hunting boar, I suppose. Aodán Mac Séafraidh. Aodán Mac Séafraidh.
And then down the west coast of Scotland, obviously, you're going to have places like the Mull of Kintyre, say.
Well, the Mull of Kintyre is very well known to us here because we can actually see it from the Antrim coast, and you can see it from the top of Ben Madigan or Cave Hill. You can look over and see Muil Kintyre is what it is in Gaelic, Muil Kintyre. and the North Channel in Gaelic is called Struth na Muile, or the channel of the Moyle, or the Mull, and it's the Mull of Kintyre that's referring to. So Muil Kintyre means the flat headland of the land, of the territory. So Kintyre and Tyr is from Latin originally terra, and so we have that in English, territory and stuff like that. Tyr means land, it can mean country as well. And Gaelic, so Muil Kintyre is another one in Scotland.
And Stranraer, when I'm going back.
Stranraer is one that I would teach people in an Irish class, because the name Rower actually means fat, as in doing your rower, fat person. But Rower can also mean plentiful, and so Srone is like a this is Srone, your nose, but Srone Rower would be a description of another wee thing jutting out into the sea, and rower mean plentiful, and they think what they meant by that was plentiful because there was lots of fish there. But there's also a theory that it was actually Sruhan Rower, which means plentiful stream, again referring to that, probably to that sea inlet that was a good place for fishing. God knows, centuries ago, who knows how long that goes back, so yeah.
And then I guess our Gael and that sort of region of Scotland, our Gael and Bute, but our Gael must be...
Our Gael's an interesting one. I didn't know anything about it, but I did a wee bit of research, and our Gael is actually Aragail, which is the sea region of the Gael being the Gaelic speaking people, so Aragail is what it is. Okay. So it's the place names are fascinating. I find that people take a real interest in those, especially when they're learning Irish, and it's sort of like between Ireland and Scotland and the Isle of Man, which has a wealth of Gaelic place names as well. It's like the blinkers fall off, and you can suddenly see where you're living and say that there's the place names actually mean something. So yeah, and. Were there any other slang words that were kind of common in Scotland? I mean, there's obviously, a name that in Irish, for example, the name for trousers is briste. And the funny thing about it, in English, it's actually, trousers is plural, okay? But in Irish, briste is singular. So you just wear a trouser.
Okay.
Whereas in Irish it's trousers, or in English it's trousers, so that it's plural. In Irish, if you're wearing trousers, it means you've got at least two pairs of breeches on. But the funny thing I found out is that the word trousers itself is actually it is from a Gaelic word originally, trúsas, and so somewhere back in the Middle Ages, people wore trousers, and in Gaelic Scotland in particular were called trúsas, and that was a word used in Old Irish as well, or Middle Irish, and so that is a borrowing from Gaelic as well. So it's there's a lot of very common words you wouldn't imagine would come from Gaelic, but they do.
Well, you wouldn't wear your kilt without your brogues or your sporran.
Sporran, there's a good one now. Sporran is a good one because everybody knows what sporran is in front of a kilt, but sporran in Gaelic actually means a purse or a wallet. So if I'm going down the road to buy something at the shop, I'll pull out my sporran, and it doesn't mean I'm ripping it up from the front of my kilt, it's actually in my pocket. So in Irish, sporran is a purse or a wallet. So it has to say it's the same thing. Basically.
And then if we're sticking with the whole kilt thing, then your plaid as well, that's a word that you...
Plaid is yes, that's another word that comes from Gaelic, and in Gaelic the word for kilt is fillibag, the little fold. So that's what they call it. So that's a bit of an insight for you into Gaelic words that are all around us and very much part of our culture. And I suppose people don't realise that many words that they use and many surnames and place names, etc., come from Gaelic, and it's very much a heritage that we all have. Anyone who lives around here, just surrounded by Gaelic names and sometimes slang words, and certainly surnames and even some personal names. So yeah, I mean, names like, for instance, people probably are unaware that names like Roy is actually Rui for red-haired, and it's similar to Rory, and there's a lot of kind of words like that, and surnames that are sort of partially Gaelic and partially English, and translated names like the surname Caldwell, which is a translation of the surname Waterski or Huirishka, which means cold water. So people, at a time when people still understood Gaelic and were speaking English, they would sometimes translate their names and have a translated name.
And that sounds quite Scots actually, because cold, you're cold.
Yeah, well,
and cold
well.
well.
Again, I mean, the form of English that people learned here, because of the history of this country, the form of English that people learned in was sort of Scots influenced English. But there's also, and it's sometimes forgotten, that there was a big influence from Elizabethan English in Ireland, both in the north here, but also around County Cork and places like that, where there's still wee traces of a sort of Elizabethan English. And I've been told that's the reason why people here, I mean, people imagine that the pronunciation of door as doer and floor as fleur is, they'll say it's Ulster Scots, but that's actually Elizabethan English pronunciation, and that's why those words are spelt double O, because that's how English people pronounced them originally. So D-O-O-R, doer, F-L-O-O-R, fleur, and that goes way back to, I suppose, the time of Shakespeare and all the rest of it. So yeah, fascinating stuff. So and that's about it, folks. I hope you enjoyed that. Hope it's given you a wee bit of an insight into Gaelic, or the Irish language, and how it's influenced the way we speak, and how we're surrounded by lots of names and interesting language, etc. Gormila Mahagav, thank you very much. That's it from us.
Okay, Slán.
Slán.